You may have many more pressing matters on your mind than what I'm about to talk about, but let's talk about how electric vehicles will be affected by the recent election results. First, there's the elephant in the room, which is the tax credit. And let's face it, executive orders are popular in the 21st century. Obama did them, Biden did them, Trump has done them. He'll do them again. So all federal benefits could be wiped out for electric vehicles on day one. It's not likely, but it's possible. And that's not the only way federal benefits could be wiped out. We'll talk about that later. Just know that if you qualified for the tax credit and you're looking to get a vehicle with the tax credit, your time may be running short. Next, let's dive into EV adoption a little bit. Those of us who have EVs will need to drive them with a little bit more spilkus.
Long story short, the spilkus came back.
Now that we know there's a little more risk involved, we need to increase the volume of our voices about why owning them is important. But more importantly, when we talk about them, the clean energy argument might not be the best one. I think the better alternative here is cost. My cousin recently switched to electric from a very large truck with very internal combustion engines. And his reason for switching was, well, I'll let him tell it.
I mean, drive or the finance is probably tied. I have a 32-mile round trip to work, but the financing is 0%. But
so demand lever was pulled. You can check out that video here. So adoption, as far as you being an ambassador of electric vehicles, definitely needs to be changed as far as our approach to the communication. We need to be methodical and delicate. When strangers ask you why you drive an EV, focus on cost. But for those you do know, who may be upset with the election results right now, let them know that their beliefs and their wallets need to align when it comes to electric vehicles. If they haven't made the leap needs to be made for that impact. On to tariffs. We live in a global economy, and EVs are, let's face it, a small percentage of cars on the road in the United States. Most trips I make, for example, I don't see any other ones. And if that's not your reality, and maybe it's the opposite of your reality, we'll talk about that in a second too. Raw materials that are central to EV production need to come from all over the world. And unless you want to go buy one of these, a lot of the parts may not even come from the US, or even the vehicle itself. My Japanese EV has an American brand's platform underneath it, but it is built in Mexico. This, once again, however, is the most American vehicle you can buy from any company of any type. So now that we've established how deceiving looks can be when it comes to the badge on a vehicle, if there's a 10% tariff on anything from any country other than the United States, EVs just got real expensive. And in turn, maybe gas cars too. But either way, this will be spun by the media as a reason not to adopt EVs, especially in the near term. And I'll get into the 100% tariff on the biggest threat to EVs later in this video. As far as infrastructure, you may live where there's chargers everywhere and everyone around you drives an EV, or at least a lot of people. But this just is not the reality for middle America. And infrastructure is the best example. In my recent EVOG podcast, Brian talks about how every time he takes the trip from his home in Maryland to his vacation home in Cape Cod, there's another charging option, and that it is so abundant as far as his charging options, he can pick based on the cost as to where he's charging and for how long. When we got supercharger access for my Honda, I was ecstatic because there were actually places I could now go that I literally could not before that supercharger access was changed. And so 51 cents per kilowatt hour, or even 55, is no deterrent for me. I can go there now. When you drive an EV in middle America, the question is, how long do I have to sit here so I can make it to the next one? And if investment doesn't continue, like this $1 billion that is supposed to go to EVgo, then middle America will never switch. The reality for those of us who live in middle America and not necessarily close to EV charging is, road tripping an EV is annoying and requires time, effort, understanding, and research. But if you're on I-95, type in your destination and everything will be fine. So as far as infrastructure investment, this could completely cease for 100 different reasons and in 10 different ways in 2025. And that'll reduce the interest in adoption, and it will reduce the interest manufacturers have in building EVs, and it could cease EV production other than, these altogether. And if all of that wasn't annoying yet, now we have to talk about legislation. The Senate, House, and Oval Office will all have opposition to electric cars and clean energy in 2025. And if the end of the tax credit isn't an executive order, it will most certainly be included in some kind of legislation, either an ending or a drastic change. Ending tax benefits for individuals outright, increasing raw material costs by reversing the Inflation Reduction Act, creating penalties for states supporting EVs, changes to the tax code, increased oil subsidies, deregulation of utilities, allowing for solar metering by individuals to be less beneficial, and allowing for an increase in the cost of electricity. It could all happen, and this will definitely be a point of attack by politicians who were elected using funds from the oil industry. They didn't invest that money for no reason. And then there's permits. Projects need permits. New factories, mines, build sites, etc. EV development will be a target. Once again, oil companies will not allow competition to enter the market without a fight. Actions will be taken, and simply delaying a permit, which is even easier than delaying the appointment of a judge, could definitely not only slow the production of EVs, but increase the prices and change the winners and losers. The fewer the options, the weaker the market. The weaker the market, the easier it is to gouge, cheat, monopolize, and cause all kinds of different financial stresses. And of course, there's lawsuits. Suing people, companies, states, because the policies, incentives, factories, or trade practices are not desired by those who file the suits, either because they're unconstitutional or for other reasons. And the harder those fight back during the appeals process, the closer those lawsuits get to the Supreme Court, at which point precedent and inevitably the rule of law will be established. EV incentives could be outlawed, for example. And that's just one example. Finally, there's China. China won't stop. Elon said this:
20 million by 2030 is an aspiration, not a promise. And people will see, based on the products that we unveil, will be able to judge for themselves whether that goal is realistic or not.
Meanwhile, China is about 10 years into a 20-year plan to take over the world automotive industry. And 20 million vehicles a year will be a reality for China very soon. The 100% tariff on Chinese vehicles was a Biden thing. The new administration could change that, repeal that, manipulate that. But no matter what, if the United States does not take the example of China and move forward with technology, China will sneak in, undercut, and take over. And it may be through some dark subsidiary from Mexico or Guatemala or wherever it's convenient for China. But whatever those cars say on them, BYD, NIO, inevitably the Chinese government is what actually lies under the hood. Because if China is building 20 million cars a year, they need the US market in order for that to make any sense. All right, so that's all the hard stuff and the yucky stuff. So how do we prevent this? For over a year now, they've been saying EV sales are slumping because 100% growth year over year literally isn't possible for very long. But there are other reasons, including the fact that the tax credit moved in 2022 from everyone to only those with less money. But you can change this. Go out and vote with your wallet. If you want an EV that will help American companies keep American jobs, keep EVs in the forefront, buy a Cadillac Lyriq, for example. It's made in the USA, and the fact that it qualifies for the tax credit means at least some of the materials are pretty local, and it's not one of these. And if you don't qualify for the EV tax credit and buying a vehicle new is crazy right now for you, as far as budget or for any other reason, look for that same vehicle in the used market. There aren't a whole lot of new EVs out every year. So most of what you would be looking for might be available used for a very reasonable price, especially right now. If all the used Cadillac Lyriqs sold very quickly, that would drive up the price of the Cadillac Lyriq in the used market. It would make people be more likely to buy them new because they maintain their resale value, and GM would look at them as an asset and something they need to continue building. If the tax credits are taken away or the cost goes through the roof overnight for some legislative reason, the early adopters, a lot of you watching this channel, need to go back to the dealership, back to the website, back to the way you got what you got this time, and get another one. If the effects of the new presidency are minimal as far as cost, at least in the short term, the reality is that price parity is basically here. The more sales there are, the more likely companies are to continue to build EVs. And the higher the volume, the more competitive the prices will get. And if you're not the type to act, and I totally understand, maybe the strategies I'm suggesting sound very unappealing right now, especially with all the other things to consider as a result of this election. Then the final action you can take is don't sell your EV in the used market. Pass it on to a family member. Find someone to give it to. Transfer the title. However you do it, don't sell your EV. This keeps the used market at as high of a value as possible. The closer used values go to new values, the more likely people are to buy new and continue to incentivize companies to build EVs. I hate to tell you to do the government's job here, but we kind of have to. Not selling your EV doesn't help the economy, and maybe you don't want to help the economy right now. So just hold on to what you have. And finally, I'm recording this before even all of the election results have been completely tabulated and finalized. So if you have any ideas for where I went wrong here, or what you think we can do as EV owners to make EV ownership more likely, more beneficial, and easier to do in the future, please let me know your thoughts down below. Part of the reason for this video is an exercise of therapy, and another part is to maybe inspire you to open your mind and find an answer for yourself or for everybody else. Join Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access to these videos. Thank you so much for your support to those who have. Subscribe for more, and we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, smash the like button.
Thank you.